Welcome back to the Global Startup Movement. I'm your host, Andrew Berkowitz. Great to have you tuning in. Today we head over to Estonia to have a conversation with Martin Villig, one of the brothers behind Taxify, the newly minted Estonian ride-hailing unicorn backed by the likes of Daimler and Didi. Taxify has emerged as a dominant player in Europe and Africa, and surprisingly has raised just 2 million euros to date before this last fundraising round, which is really a testament to the execution ability of the Villig brothers and their team. In addition to Taxify, Martin is also a leading figure in the Estonian startup ecosystem, having also co-founded the Estonian Startup Leaders Club, as well as Garage 48 and Lyft 99, which have become the central convening points for Estonian entrepreneurs, engineers, and designers. One more exciting announcement before we get into it. The Global Startup Movement is now an Alexa and Google Home skill. A simple prompt of activate the Global Startup Movement skill on Alexa or play the Global Startup Movement on Google Home will play the latest episode or pick up from where you last left off. But now that's enough from me. I'm excited to pass it off to Martin Villig, the co-founder of Taxify.
Entrepreneurship has become a global phenomenon. Uncover the stories of entrepreneurs and investors worldwide, from sub-Saharan Africa to Silicon Valley and beyond, here on the Global Startup Movement. Now, here's your host, Andrew Berkowitz.
So Martin, thanks for taking the time to come on. It's great to have you here. Why don't you start us off with a little bit about you and how you ended up starting Taxify with your brother?
My name is Martin. I'm co-founder of Taxify. In total, we have 3 founders, me, my brother Markus, and Oliver, a technical co-founder. And myself, personally, I have been doing different businesses for the last 20 years. I started my first company during university and then exited it even in 2 years, in 99, before the first internet bubble.
It's good timing.
Yeah, very good. And then, but it was quite small, mostly Estonian Baltic scale. But then worked at Nasdaq Tallinn Stock Exchange, then Skype, and after that have been doing various startup projects since 2007. And then from 2013 have been focused fully on Taxify's growth.
Nice. And so you just recently raised a pretty large 175 million round led by Daimler. But previously, I mean, since you started Taxify, you all have raised a pretty low amount of venture capital compared to, Uber and Lyft. And so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts just on how you think about capital efficiency versus speedy growth with your international expansion.
Yes, so as we are an Estonian company from Eastern Northern Europe, then definitely on early years we managed to get some local angels and then local VC funds, smaller ones, but was actually difficult in 2015-16 to raise larger funding, because the whole mindset of the investors in Europe was that it seems like the big guys in the industry are raising billions, and it's very difficult for the smaller ones to challenge them. So there was a big hype that big guys will win the market. And then we just had to bootstrap and then be very cost efficient, so that how to just grow with our organic revenues. And we didn't have the luxury to spend so much money. On the other side, it actually helped us to figure out and come up with a very efficient expansion models, very efficient cost structures. And I think that in long term, it actually helps us so that we are quite efficient. And then looking at our platform revenues versus funding, then definitely we are the most efficient player in the market among the top 10 bigger platforms.
When it comes to startups in Eastern Europe and the Baltics raising capital from investors outside of that area, do you think that stigma and perception has changed since you started Taxify?
Yes, I would say that the Estonian startup ecosystem is maybe 10, 12 years old. And if we look at last 5 years, then the image of Estonian startups have been increasing or getting much better globally. And we have probably now around 10, maybe even 20 startups who have raised funding from the top names in the industry. And most of the companies or bigger companies now in Estonia, startups still have their HQs in London or probably US Delaware, which is the most popular location. but Taxify is one of the fewer ones and probably the biggest at the moment, whose HQ is still located in Tallinn, Estonia. So our legal headquarters is here, and then all our funding we have been raising have fully gone to the Estonian entity. So I think that's a very good example and role model also for the other companies to actually encourage other investors to also invest to Estonian companies and not move HQ somewhere else. So I think Taxify has shown a good way for the others.
Absolutely. And so on an early fundraising deck for Taxify, you had a slide that was titled Growth Challenges. And one of the questions or one of the bullet points that you had was unfair competition with a smiling emoji. And you had Finland and Lithuania under that bullet point. And so could you explain that to me and why, when it comes to your international expansion within the Baltics, why those two countries were challenging for you?
Yeah, Finland is very highly regulated market in terms of taxis, very similar to other Nordic countries. They have certain or clear limitations of taxi licenses per city. So now Finland is moving from 1st of July to lift these quotas so that the market gets free. There are no more limits how many drivers can be per city. But previously that was the challenge. And in Finland, in cities, there is usually only one dispatch center who then takes the orders and then dispatches them to all the small taxi companies. And none of the dispatch centers actually wanted to cooperate with us. So and they were also threatening the taxi drivers that if they join some other platform, they wouldn't get rides from the dispatch center anymore. And then all the small fleets, usually Finnish taxi companies are small, so 1 to 3 to 5 cars, and then they were just afraid to take any other source, and they stick to the dispatch center. So it has been quite complicated market previously, but now the market is opening up, and then we actually see now regular open market competition in Finland.
And are there other Estonian companies that have also struggled with their expansion in the Baltics? Because I know that within the whole European startup ecosystem, the market fragmentation across markets is something that I've found to be one of the reasons why Europe isn't necessarily producing the amount of unicorns that are coming out of the US and China and larger markets. And so do you think that within just the Baltic region, is there how challenging is it to go from one Baltic country to another? And do you think it's less challenging than going, say, from Germany to France?
I would say that Baltics are quite, at least in our industry, they are quite common. So I would say that in general, in Europe, the regulation, at least in transport sector, is a bit different. So there are some regions that are more open. I would say Baltic and Eastern Europe. And then there are more traditional markets, France and UK, that have more complicated regulation, but they are still open. And then more, let's say, heavily regulated or more traditional regulation is in Germany, Spain, Italy, and Nordic markets, and Hungary as well are one of those. So those are more complicated and more traditional taxi related regulation. So these are the markets where we actually still need to show the benefits of opening up the market and why it benefits customers, because current regulation only benefits taxi companies and taxi drivers, and taxi service in these over-regulated markets are actually very expensive, and it's a luxury service compared to Eastern Europe, where taxis is rather commodity, and even students take taxis quite often, several times a month when they need to get home from the party or something else when public transport is not working. We are actually, we like regulation, but a reasonable one, and we feel that most, or not most, but these regions I named, Germany and some other markets, that the regulation is just a bit outdated and is not fully open for actual competition.
Right. And so can you contrast that with your expansion into the African markets that you're in? Because I think, Taxify is one of the very few ride sharing companies that have really successfully entered the primary tech hubs in Africa, like Nairobi, Lagos, Accra, where, I was on the ground in Nairobi in October, and I mean, Uber just wasn't that good of an experience there. And so, I mean, what is your kind of challenges or thoughts on your international approach in the African markets?
I think African markets are actually very good market for us, and why it's that public transport is not so well developed as it is in European countries or cities. The other is that there is huge demand from the driver side. There is still unemployment is an issue in bigger cities, so there is big interest from the driver's side to join the platforms and earn income for the people and families and drivers. So if we put these together, and the third part is safety, so that if we put all these aspects together, then it makes quite a good market conditions for growth. So that for platforms like us, usually the biggest challenge is getting the driver side supply, and as we see big interest from driver side, then when the service quality is good, rides are affordable, then the passenger side demand is always growing. And if we can meet that with enough supply on driver side, then the service is robust, and it seems that in Africa it's currently going well.
Right. And so, I mean, when you first had the thought of expanding into Africa, I mean, how did you go about your market research? And I mean, what have you learned from operating all over Africa so far?
So we have seen that Africa is rather complicated or a different market than the rest of the countries we have been operating, and it hasn't been a big priority also for the tech giants, US companies and the others. So we have really looked into the markets, understood its behavior, and then tried to really localize and put the interest of drivers in the forefront, so that we try to be the platform where drivers make the best income. And we have also implemented local payment methods, for example, M-Pesa in Kenya, which is most popular method there. And our drivers can accept cash and electronic payments. We have good walk-in centers and support and all of that. So yeah. Plus, additionally, we have understood that the cars are just one part of the transport mix. But as the bigger cities, there are also traffic jams on peak hours. Then people are starting to use more and more also alternative transport methods like boda bodas, which are the motorcycles, or budgies, which is like tuk-tuk type of three-wheelers in Tanzania, for example. So we have been innovating by increasing the quality and safety of these kind of maybe non-traditional transport methods for Europe. But in Africa, these are becoming more and more common, and we actually try to make them more safety. We train the drivers, we give them helmets, and then even first aid trains. So yeah. Plus also the accountability, so that in taxis it's already very common that you can rate them. So now we try to bring those ratings also to motorcycles and tuk-tuk drivers, so that generally improve their quality and then the availability and efficiency. So that currently they usually just stand some places on the streets, but it's not so convenient. If people maybe need them, let's say, half a kilometer away, they can now order them with an app, and then it's much more convenient, and these drivers get much more rides per day. So these are the ways how we have been tapping into the local communities, understanding the local needs, and then trying to really to adapt the product for the local markets.
Speaking of non-traditional transportation, before we do dive into the Estonian startup ecosystem, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the recent trend in electric scooters. And, for example, Bird raising at $1 billion valuation last month, and now raising again at a $2 billion valuation. Mm-hmm. And I know Uber and Lyft have also stated their intent to get into the space as well. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Like, is this just Silicon Valley exuberance, or like what what are your thoughts on electric scooters and last mile transportation?
I think it's definitely a fast developing market, and we are monitoring this market and also autonomous and all of the possible new segments. So, but I think that it's will be also a regulatory challenge in a way that cities are currently thinking that most cities don't even have regulation for this kind of transport, especially in Europe. So we're actually analyzing to understand what are the trends and if we should also tap into these transport methods. But yeah, the more developed market it is, the more the regulators would probably need to react fast and come up with reasonable regulation, which will actually define a lot of the growth potential or challenges for these methods. So we have heard that probably in London, where the streets are full of people, then this kind of, let's say, electric scooters might be challenging. But in cities or maybe in the Soho part, but if we go out of the center, then when streets are more empty and more room, then there these kind of short distance travels could be very easily managed with electric scooters, electric bikes, just regular bikes, and all of the other things, that kind of modern transport methods. So yeah, we are actively monitoring and trying to build our strategy towards these new categories.
Right. In addition to Taxify, you're also kind of a leader in bringing the Estonian startup community together and a co-founder of Garage 48, the Lyft 99 co-working space and hub. And so I'd be curious, what is your secret sauce when it comes to launching a successful community hub for a city startup ecosystem? Because I interview a lot of different leaders in cities around the world, and, I would say there are a few different tech hubs that are, I think, doing a really good job of being a convening point for their community. But I think, Estonia and what you all have done with Garage 48 really, really stands out. And so, I mean, what has been kind of the secret sauce to your success with that?
I think that there is another side which is not that visible, is that we actually co-founded initially the Estonian Startup Leaders Club, which was 2009, and today it has 90 founders. So basically all Estonian successful startups belong to one club. And we have internal Skype group chat, which is quite lively, of asking questions, supporting each other, sharing news, whatever, sharing advice, and we have monthly gatherings. So, and this is more internal, meaning that this is more like a club, internal network, and supporting each other. And we had another initiative. We thought we should do something public, and that was Garage 48, which was just building the ecosystem, bringing new people into the startup ecosystem, because we saw that it was a lot of people walking around with ideas, but they didn't know any developers, designers, and so they had problem of actually even building the first prototype. So we thought if we bring different people together, put them in one room, form teams, and then build first prototype over the weekend, that's what Garage 48 is doing, then we facilitate these new connections. We show that we actually increase the probability and show to people that it's possible to build something in really short time. And if they have the prototypes, they can go out and test if it works. And of course, many of them fail, but the experience have been really valuable, and the connections between new people are already done. But even if that specific idea or prototype fails, many of these teams or team members have formed next teams to build something next. So I think that has been helpful, and lots of the existing founders are going to mentor these events. And as Estonia is so small, everyone are in one city, then quite often younger entrepreneurs ask the older guys for the lunch meeting or just some half an hour mentoring sessions, and we have very lively startup events. Probably every week you have 5-7 events you can go, and then so it's all on the one level. So the guys who already have been building bigger companies and the younger starters, they are all in the same community, and they feel quite equal and easily accessible. So I think that is maybe something, but I think in overall it comes down to the Skype as being a very good role model back in 2005 when it started, or 2003 even. So lots of people worked there. They saw that Estonians are capable of building a good global product, and also hundreds of people made their initial small money with stock options, which they now have been investing into their own projects as seed capital, or supporting others as angel investors. So yeah, and probably weather in Northern Europe also plays a small role, because 9 to 8 months a year we have rather dark time, which is not as attractive as it's in Spain or somewhere else to just go on the beach. So people stay in the office and work and then try to build something cool. So I would say that those are maybe the little bit the insight of why Estonians have been rather successful per capita, for example, to look at that. Many companies coming out from here.
So, I mean, if you had to point to one, what would you say is maybe the a weak point or the biggest weakness right now in the whole ecosystem?
I think it's the number of talent we have. So that Estonia has overall 1 million people, and in Tallinn it's about 400,000. And there are some guesses that the IT ecosystem totally is probably maybe 10,000 people, and let's say maybe software developers out of there could be 3,000-4,000 maybe. So that we have really lots of good quality startups that are fighting for somewhat the same talent pool. So that's why more and more companies are now hiring mostly from abroad. So if we look at Taxify as well, then we actually relocate 80% of our software developers now to Estonia, and also doing development hubs somewhere else. So looking for some spots for good talent. So I would say talent is probably one, but I would say that's global challenge, because all the tech companies haven't heard any founder saying that, whoa, we have enough talent to build whatever we like. So it's always a limitation. But otherwise, if we look at other roles, then business development and maybe marketing and maybe growth and performance marketing and sales and business development are maybe the areas that Estonians are not that strong, and the companies have solved that in a way that they create some sales offices in markets closer to their actual customers, depending which market they want to go to. Is it US or Asia or London? And then they hire some local good persons for biz dev or marketing there. And then they try to learn from them and then train maybe Estonians to get to similar levels. So I would say that maybe that's one of the other challenges.
So Martin, we are going to finish off with a quick fire round, 4 questions, up to 60 seconds each. How does that sound?
Yeah, sure.
So let's say I'm in Tallinn right now, and my flight leaves tomorrow morning. What's one thing that you would recommend that I need to do before I leave?
As a founder for startups, or just go around in Tallinn, or what would you
just as a tourist?
As a tourist, we have really beautiful old town and really good nature. So I don't know, drive 20 kilometers out of Tallinn, and then you can walk in the forest, seeing no one the whole day. So yeah, these could be my recommendations.
What's your favorite business book and why?
Well, maybe a recent one I read was Elon Musk's biography. So it was quite inspirational. So seeing all the challenges and actually running multiple businesses in parallel. So I think that's quite amazing. So and then really, really inspirational.
What is your favorite bar or restaurant in Tallinn and why?
We have quite many nice restaurants. One of my favorites is actually Tuljak, which is next to the Song Festival ground. It's on a small hill next to the sea, so it's really good on evenings seeing sunset. And I actually was there this week as well, so that's one of my favorites.
And finally, what's your favorite thing about living in Estonia?
Wow, there are like lots of things I enjoy. So it's more really lively community, rather small city, so not that much traffic jams. Good nature to go out with on the weekends, or hiking, boating, things like that. Good for children, raising family, and very good, I would say, salary and living standard ratio. So that I think it's a very good place to be.
Awesome. Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to add Andrew on Snapchat at @andberk. That's ANDBERK to see firsthand a day in the life of an entrepreneur in cities all around the world.